Test server season. Probably one of the best times of the season. Mainly because it's usually the time where one side is going to be very, very angry. This could be for a number of reasons, whether it be one side getting a massive amount of buffs, or their side getting a massive amount of nerfs, or really nothing to compensate for the buffs on the other side. It's really a coin flip as to what happens during the test server and who gets changed, so that's something to keep in mind whenever we talk about these things. And with the recent changes that have been made into the test server that will be coming within a week or two, it is very evident that the game will become survivor-sided. I'm sure you've heard about it from a lot of the content creators that are on the sphere, that these changes will make the game survivor-sided, and I am inclined to agree. Now, when I first heard about these changes, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit heated. Really heated, in fact, yelling in the car type of heated. I am going to admit that. I'm never going to hide anything from you, and I'll be honest, I debated on storing that anger for, a video like this where I can just yell and rant and do all that kind of stuff. But you know what? Like, during that time when I was yelling in the car, I found inner peace. I walked 1,000 miles. I did a little bit of soul searching. I come to the conclusion that that wouldn't be very objective if I were to just let my emotions out there. Yes, I'm still going to use my emotions to illustrate why some of the changes I don't like, but I feel like it would be better if I were to look at these changes in a more objective sense. There are some changes I am really disappointed about, I'm not gonna lie. For example, Cowboy and I guess QS, but honestly, I don't really care about QS. It's mostly just I feel like there's a lot of characters that could have been changed but just didn't, and I feel like that was a really big missed opportunity. But regardless, we are going to cover all the changes to the characters first. Yes, usually I would cover the persona changes first, but I feel like it would be best to talk about the character changes since there are some massive character buffs that are coming to the game, and I feel like it's better to get this out there for you guys to know about before going into the persona changes. By the way, the video is going to be very long, and I don't want it to be like an hour or something, so yeah, as usual, we will be cutting the persona changes to a separate video and then covering the character changes. I will briefly go over the base kit changes, such as the area selection mode, the rank mode showing the hunter who it is to the team now, as well as the rescue buff, so don't worry about that, we will talk about that. But with that being said, let's go over the character changes now, shall we? We'll start off with the hunter changes because these are the characters who got the least amount of changes, in my opinion. There are some hunters who got some really big changes, but for the most part, they're very minor, in my opinion. We'll start off with QS when we're talking about the hunter changes because, I'm gonna be honest, I really don't care about the changes that they did. All they really did was improve some stuff about QS, such as selecting contact points when you're pathing with Maxwell's Demon, or when you're just placing down contact points in general, basically trying to prevent you from placing them in the wrong areas, or placing them badly. It's fine, it's okay, it's an okay, change. It's not a buff nor nerf, so that's fine. They also adjusted his cue balls when you're trying to put them on a contact point, basically trying to make it to where you're not going to place your cue balls on a bad point anymore, or a point you didn't want to place it down, which is, once again, fine. That's a fine change. It's quality of life, which is good, but that's really it with QS. He really only got quality of life, and that's really it. And I feel like that alone basically should tell you the extent of the hunter buffs that are going to be coming with this update. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Quality of life is a really good thing, but I feel like some of the hunters in these patch notes did need some very big changes because they are slowly falling off in the meta. And I feel like some changes like this just don't really help, and it's just really frustrating to see that. A character who didn't get some small quality of life, however, has to be Geisha, who got some pretty decent buffs in my opinion. They increased her normal attack range and her charge attack range, listening to the complaints the community has about her attack hitbox. They increased the normal attack range to 2.95, and then they increased the charge attack range to 3.21 meters, which is a sizable buff if you were to compare it to her normal ranges. They also reduced her recovery time when you miss an attack, making it to 0.66 seconds, which is a very sizable buff to her attack. This means that if a survivor actually dodges her attack, now they're going to have less of a window to be able to dodge the second attack. It basically means Geisha will be able to recover faster and then do more attacks and possibly get that hit off faster, which is a good thing. They also improved Geisha's hit detection when attacking, making it to where she'll be easier to hit her opponents now, and they reduced her recovery time when hitting an obstacle to 0.95 seconds, which is extremely good. Sometimes hitting an obstacle can be really punishing for a hunter like Geisha, so reducing that time will be very nice. Additionally, Geisha's hitbox is infamous for missing when it shouldn't have, so adding more hit detection, making it better, will just be a lot better for hunters in general, such as Geisha. They also made it to where Geisha going into Soul Departure and dropping down to Soul Departure is much faster now, as well as making it to where if she uses her dash while in Soul Departure, her cooldown will always be set to 4 seconds, making it much faster than if you were to dash normally. These are tremendous buffs to Soul Departure, as they will now allow Geisha to go up into the air faster, use her dash much quicker, as well as be able to go into her dash much faster, allowing her better map traversal as well as better rushdown options. That 4-second cooldown will make a big difference in chases as well as traversing the map, so this is a tremendous buff all around. And finally, they improved the Butterflies' release logic, reducing the chances of it being released into obstacles, which is just really good because it just allows Geisha to have more consistent butterflies, which means more consistent dashes, if I'm getting that correctly. Overall, while I'm not a big fan of Geisha, these are definitely big buffs to give to a character like Geisha, especially the Soul Departure buff. This basically makes it a semi-useful option when back then it was only really used for camping or map traversal. Now there's a really good use for Soul Departure now, allowing you to use it for that reduced cooldown or to chase down a survivor who is using their ability to pull distance. So Geisha now has a bigger counter to those characters, as well as having more dashes to be able to, go into chases better. Naiad is also a hunter who got a very small amount of buffs added to her, but those buffs are actually really significant, so let's cover them. When you're a survivor and you leave her abyss range, basically that giant circle that she, puts down, now when you're waiting for humidity to go down, it will now take 10 seconds before it will start to decrease rather than the original 9 seconds. This means Naiad will have a 10-second window now to be able to, try and add more humidity to you or water pop you instead of the original 9 seconds, basically giving her an extra second of time to be able to try and, water burst you, which is really good. The time crunch you have as Naiad can be extremely punishing, especially if you're going against, mobility survivors or survivors who can tank your damage or survivors with flywheel. You basically have a lot of things you have to worry about when you're going against a survivor, so having an additional second can help. However, I think the biggest buff that they gave to Naiad is actually this next one. Basically, now you can use her dash even if your harpoon is off cooldown or you're not even using her slipstream in general. Basically, even though you're walking like normal, you can now use her dash in order to dash, drop her harpoon, and be in slipstream mode, meaning that you will have a lot more slipstreams to work with, be able to lock down a lot more areas, and potentially get some water pops that you couldn't ordinarily do without your dash. This is an essential change to Naiad, as it just gives her a lot more versatility when using her water areas, allowing her to close off a lot more spaces in a faster amount of time, as well as just give a lot more versatility to her dashes. So, in my opinion, this is a really good change, especially when you time your dashes correctly, to where you pull the harpoon back, you get a second dash now, and then you automatically use that dash, get the water pop, or you just seal off another area. It's a very amazing change. Finally, they slightly increased the launching action for her normal attack, which probably means her attack lingers more, which is alright. It's a okay-ish buff. Nothing too major when compared to both the Abyss changes as well as the dash changes. Overall, out of the 5 hunters who got changed in this update, I think Naiad is the one who got the biggest buffs out of the 5. Naiad was already a pretty decent high hunter to play as. It's just that she definitely doesn't really have that much tools to work with in the current meta. With these changes, she still probably will be a TIE hunter, and she's still probably going to get buffed in the next update. Let's be honest, she's probably going to get buffed in the next season, but she'll definitely have a lot more tools to work with and will be able to get water pops more consistently, which is nice. Now we get into the character that I'm really disappointed on when it comes to changes, in my opinion, that being Cowboy. For those of you unaware, I used to be a really big Cowboy player when he first released, and it was mainly because of his fire spirits. I really love the Final Present fire spirit, and I love lobbing his fire spirits to get attacks off. with his buff, he is arguably much better than he was back then, but as the years gone by, he has been slowly falling off to the point where he is definitely a lower tier hunter, and I was hoping they would give him a lot of hard-hitting buffs to compensate. However, as we'll see, they didn't really do that. Instead, they gave him small quality of life. The biggest buff that he got was his Fire Spirit's cooldown being reduced. Now, instead of it being 15 seconds, it is now 13 seconds. Now, this isn't bad. I don't think this is a bad change, but I feel like this isn't that great of a change. Now, when you miss your fireballs, instead of it taking 60 years for your cooldown to recover, it will now take 15 years. Granted, you still get the speed boost when you absorb the fireball, and you can still, lob your fireballs to get good value out of them, but I still don't think this is that decent of a buff. Well, it's really decent, at least compared to the other changes that he got, but, I was wishing for a lot more. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, this is the only, stat-wise buff that they gave him. Everything else is just quality of life. For example, they added a sound when you hit with your Cowboy Fire Spirit, so you will be able to tell when a survivor gets injured, which is really stupid. I felt like the sound was arguably better with the old version than it is with the new version, if I'm being honest. I kind of like the old sound a lot better. Additionally, I don't understand why this needed a bigger sound to it when you could very easily tell if a survivor got hit based on the old sound, as well as, seeing that the survivor got injured. So I just feel like this wasn't a necessary change, but hey, it might just be me. Finally, they slightly increased the camera's height, so now you're not going to be looking at the ground as often as Cowboy, which is definitely a good change. It was definitely a good quality of life change. I hated the camera on Cowboy. The camera on Cowboy was really terrible, and I kind of wish that they would do this for Violetta and Dream Witch as well. Cameras that are too low to the ground just makes it really hard to chase, makes it really too hard to, see in the distance, and it just makes Hunter harder to play in general, so I do kind of hope they will go back and change these cameras for these other hunters. But for Cowboy, I do think this was a decent change, and it was a long overdue change. Overall, these Cowboy changes, while they're not amazing, they're not the ones that I would like, they're definitely good, they're definitely okay changes, and they will definitely make Cowboy a lot better to play. That's really all they will do. They will just make Cowboy a lot better to play. Now for the most egregious change that they did, in my opinion, it's the Bloody Queen change. And the reason why it's so egregious is because a lot of people had this Mandela effect that this was already in the game to begin with, but it turns out it wasn't for some reason. So I think this is really egregious, and I think this is probably the worst buff that they did, because this should have been in the game since her release. What am I talking about? Well, now when you're starting to summon your mirror as Bloody Queen, the mirror will appear within obstacles. Basically, you can now see the position of the mirror even if it's behind an obstacle. And some of you might think, hold on, can't you already do that with Bloody Queen? No, you can't. I tried it in game, and no, you cannot see her mirror through obstacles. This honestly explains why some Bloody Queens were really bad at placing mirrors down, because they couldn't see where their mirrors were. But regardless, this is a stupid change. It should have been in the game for a long time. It's honestly shocking they waited until now to change this, but it's in the game now, which is nice. In my opinion, however, I feel like they could have changed a bit more with Bloody Queen. For example, they probably should have made it to where she can unsummon her mirror immediately and then get the cooldown much faster like they did with Anne. I just feel like right now Bloody Queen is sort of falling off hard in the meta. She's constantly dropping and dropping down due to these new Survivor releases, as well as these new Survivor buffs. In fact, with these Survivor buffs that are coming in this update, Bloody Queen might be falling off harder in the meta. And because of that, I feel like they should have addressed this a lot more with her buffs. And I feel like they could have done a lot more, which they didn't, which is sad. This isn't a terrible buff. It definitely helps, but this should have been in the game. And the fact that it wasn't until now is kind of baffling. So yeah, that's all the Hunter changes. Overall, they're all pretty decent. They're pretty okay-ish, but they're nowhere near as massive as the Survivor changes that we will be talking about. I am not kidding when I say this. The Survivor changes are massive and they are game-changing. So let's actually talk about them now, shall we? Starting off with the most infuriating change for me, but definitely the most egregious change out of all the other characters, is Cowboy. Now they finally added a toggle to Cowboy, allowing him to target everything, just characters such as survivors or the hunter, or obstacles. The reason why it was so annoying to me with this change is basically due to the fact that, when the Cowboy change happened to where he can lasso pallets and ciphers, it just became really egregious to try and lasso save as Cowboy. And this is due to the fact that Cowboy could, be trying to lasso the hunter or a survivor, but if there's a pallet behind the hunter or in front of the hunter, the targeting will go for the pallet instead, pulling the Cowboy to the pallet and thus missing out on the lasso save. It was really obnoxious to deal with, and NetEase tried to fix this and said that they fixed this multiple times, but they just didn't. And it was just really obnoxious to see them keep lying about it. So, it's better late than never that they finally added the toggle, and you know what? It works. It really works, and it makes Cowboy support so much better. The problem I have is with the toggle. It's just really annoying to use. It's not like the patient toggle, and it's not like the gardener toggle in any way, or the gravekeeper toggle. It's nothing like that. It's basically like this weird swiping thing, which I just don't like, but I think it just has something to be with, like, I have to just get used to it, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, overall, the Cowboy change, not bad, long overdue. Priestess is another survivor who got very small changes, but, due to her reputation as being an annoying survivor, I'm sure a lot of Hunter players won't like this. First off, survivors can now see where the portals is when they are close to them. Their outline will be shown, and you will be able to see where they will take them. This will allow survivors to plan their routes a lot more effectively, which will make support Priestess a lot better since it's usually not promoted as much as her kiting game or her global portals. Additionally, now they will take a lot less time to set up these portals, now being reduced by 0.12 seconds, which will definitely make it a lot easier to place her portals down, allow her to kite a lot better, as well as allow her to, do a lot more plays with them. I don't really have much to say on Priestess. The changes are nice and they will definitely make her a bit better, but other than that, there's not really much that they can be said about these changes. Professor got some pretty small buffs as well. For example, they reverted his scale nerf that they did to him way back then. It was a change that I was really complaining about, and they reverted it to where it is now 2 scales that are on the field instead of 1 scale, which will definitely make his support game a bit better, as well as allow survivors to get more scales in the match. Additionally, when you miss your shell shock, or if you tank a stun with your shell shock, the cooldown has been reduced to 40 seconds instead of it being 45 seconds, allowing you to use your shell shock a lot faster if you were to miss it or tank a stun. Overall, really small buffs that won't really change his place in the meta, but will definitely be much better to play with him now with these changes in the game. Now we are entering big boy territory. We have some big boy changes coming to the game, starting with Gardener. Now she can toggle her shield whether she is stunned or not, or under control effect, and additionally, she can now put her shield down even if she is stunned in general. This will make it much more better for dealing with stun hunters, as you can now tank the hit. They will now be forced to either wait it out or hit her bubble, thus putting them into attack cooldown, or allowing Gardener to, recover from the stun, and, maybe take a window, go to a pallet, drop it, or even give some supports time to be able to, help Gardener out, which is just really good in general. Additionally, the bubble will only pop if it does tank the equivalent of 1 damage state. Now, for Gamekeeper's hook and abilities that can pierce the bubble, this won't really do anything to stop those abilities. They will still be able to either pop the bubble or damage her through the bubble. However, for hunters like Bonbon or Sculptor who can cancel her bubble early by just using a chip hit, they will not be able to damage her anymore. They will not be able to pop the bubble quickly anymore, and thus they are going to be forced to either use their chip hits in order to pop the bubble, or they are going to be forced to wait out the bubble until it finishes, which is massive for Gardener. Overall, Gardener got some really big buffs that will definitely help her against some of the niche hunters in the meta, such as hunters who can stun or hunters who can deal chip damage. She definitely won't be a must pick for every hunter, since a lot of the hunters will be able to blitz her, or a lot of the hunters can just ignore her bubble. But against a lot of those hunters who could have downed her quickly by using chip hits, or could have stunned in order to stop the bubble, they will not be effective against her anymore, which is really nice. Lawyer got a really good kiting buff at the early game. Now, for the first 30 seconds of the match, Lawyer's movement speed and his vaulting speed are now doubled when you are doing their specific actions, or tripled if you are using the map. This means that if you are running, or if you're vaulting a window during this time, those effects will be doubled, so you will get twice the buff that you would originally get, or 3 times if you have your map open. Now, there's a bit of a misconception I want to essentially shut down before people are starting to argue with. No, this does not apply to his decoding buff. This is only for his movement speed and his vaulting. The decoding buff is not affected by this buff, and this buff is solely meant for his early game containment if the hunter finds him early. And for that sense, overall, I think this is a really decent buff. This will allow him to get his buffs much faster, allowing him to kite longer with his movement speed buffs or vault windows a lot faster, allowing him to, kite for a lot longer, which is definitely really nice. It's definitely not the biggest buff in the world, but it will definitely help him in the early game when he really needs it. Now for the change people have been doom posting about, and I can't blame them if I'm being honest. Doctor! Who really likes Doctor? Not me, that's for sure. They added a new item to Doctor for her to use, Medical Booster. She gets 2 medical boosters per match, and when she uses one, she will automatically heal herself by 40%, meaning she will have a full 80% of automatically heal per match. Now, people have been doom posting about, her going to be broken now, she's going to automatically heal, she's going to essentially break the game and just be one of the most annoying survivors in the game. And I think a lot of people understand that, that's probably not the case. It's only 2 uses per match. You're not really going to get that much value from that. But I think the reason why people are doom posting about this so much is because, well, it's Doctor. Doctor is inherently a very annoying survivor to face off against as a hunter, and seeing her automatically heal herself in seconds is definitely not a fun feeling to have. So yeah, if you're wondering why people are doom posting so much about Doctor, that's why. And I don't blame them, because I really don't like facing against Doctor either. But, this is definitely a big buff for Doctor, and this will definitely make her a lot better to play as. Oh, before I forget, they also removed her global buff to the team, allowing them to heal 5% faster, but let's be honest, who really gives a shit about that? Let's be honest to ourselves, who gives a shit? Puppeteer is a survivor who really didn't need a buff, if I'm being honest, but he still got one. I don't know why, I don't know how he got one, but he got one, so let's talk about that. The first buff I actually do really like, I'm gonna be honest, and that's his Undaunted buff. Now, if you use your Undaunted and you actually block a hit or dodge a stun with the Undaunted, his movement speed will be increased to 50% once you get back into your Puppeteer state. This basically rewards you for actually using your Undaunted to dodge a hit or to block a stun, which I think is really good in my opinion. I think any reward or any incentive to use your Undaunted to block a stun or block a stun is definitely necessary, because right now you only really use Undaunted to make the timer last a little bit longer as Puppeteer, buy a bit more time. That's really all you use Undaunted for. Maybe in the niche cases where the hunter has detention, you might want to use it in order to block the detention hit, but other than that, you don't really use Undaunted for anything else, so giving a bigger incentive to use it is really nice. What isn't really nice, however, is the other buff that they added, allowing Puppeteer to use your Lewis while in final effort, or in layman's terms, tie turner. I don't really know why they did this. I really don't know. The one drawback to Puppeteer that essentially was the only drawback he had other than his healing debuff was the fact that he couldn't use his item while in tie turner. It basically left him open to getting double down if he rescues, or allowed him to get down in relative pace when you rescue him as the survivor. It basically just gave him a little bit of a counterplay to him, making him a lot weaker in tie turner. However, with this change, he can now use his Lewis, basically allowing him to kite for much longer, basically giving him no downsides to rescuing at all. You basically have no excuse not to run tie turner on Puppeteer, because if you get hit or get terror shock, you can still rescue, and you will still be able to use Lewis in order to prevent the double down. It's basically just mind-blowing that they did this. They basically removed the one thing that could have made for a good counter for Puppeteer, but they did it, so at this point, I'm just really frustrated. I don't get what they were planning with this. I just don't get the thought process. Finally, to add more salt to the wound, they basically increased Lewis's duration as well as flexible joints' duration from 8 seconds to 9 seconds. Now it will just take a little bit longer before Puppeteer will go back into his normal form when he goes into Lewis, or 10 seconds if he uses Undaunted. Additionally, this means he can be in Lewis for a little bit longer when next to the chair, which could make a difference when going for those rescues. It basically is just an overall buff to Puppeteer as a character, which, once again, I don't understand why they did this. I don't understand why they decided to buff this character. He's already a meta pick. they're just making him more meta. And shockingly, really shockingly, despite the fact that this meta character just got more buffs, making them more meta, it's still not the biggest buff that they gave. No, now we're going to talk about the top 2 buffs that they gave to these 2 survivors, starting with Perfumer. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke for a second. I didn't mean Perfumer. What I meant to say is they gave a buff to a character called Puppeteer 2. What do I mean by this? Well, now when Perfumer recalls using her perfume, she will now gain a damage reduction equivalent for 1 hit for 3 seconds. This hit can be used on anything. Terror shocks, it can be used for detention hits, it can be used for chip hits or normal hits. No matter what, she will always reduce half the damage that she gains, or full damage if it's a normal hit. Basically, they're giving the 1.0 Lewis that he had when he was launched into the game onto Perfumer's recall, and this lasts for 3 seconds. And additionally, this effect is only exclusive for Perfumer, so this is exclusive to her, which is good because, God forbid, imagine what would happen if every survivor had this effect. This giga buffs her Kite tremendously, making her go from this very, very weak and very predictable survivor to this borderline oppressive survivor when it comes to routing. Now, you can essentially tank anything that you want and just be fine. You trying to vault a window and you might get terror shock, you can just use that, 3 seconds of invulnerability to tank the hit, just go to half health, and then, speed boost away. You're trying to go for a rescue, well, now you can just recall with that perfume and then be able to, get the rescue off. If you get, terror shock, that's fine. You can just rescue again, and bada bing, bada boom, you got the rescue off. As a matter of fact, let's say you're injured with Perfumer now, and you still have perfumes. Now, originally, these perfumes would be useless unless you have a drop down or you're able to mind game the hunter, because, these perfumes can only be used to gain distance or try to, mind game the hunter. Now, these perfumes are not useless anymore, since you can now use them while injured, recall back, get that 3 seconds shield, and if the hunter hits you, you will not go down. Basically, you can now stall the hunter out with these perfumes now, which basically turns them from this very useless item for a perfumer if she gets, injured to the point of being able to go down, to these extremely oppressive and very strong items in order to buy as much time as possible. It's honestly sad that they had all this time to buff this survivor who was definitely falling off the meta, I'm not gonna lie, and the only thing they could do is basically turn her into Puppeteer 2. It's really sad that they had to go to that point. But if we were to be objective, this is definitely a massive buff to Perfumer, and this will definitely make her far stronger in the meta. She will now have less counters that she won't have to worry about, and this will definitely make her a lot stronger in terms of being a pseudo rescuer or just, kiting in general. Finally, we have Toy Merchant, who got giga buff this patch, and I'm not even kidding when I say giga buff. Now, all survivors who pick up her toy, like her little toy things, will now be able to use the items within them. If you click on the button, it will no longer just drop the item anymore. Now you can use the item within that toy. This means characters who cannot normally pick up chest items in normal matchmaking, such as, Embalmer, Fire Investigator, Enchantress, can now use those chest items to their advantage, which is a really nice support buff to Toy Merchant. Additionally, when you use your normal item, your now toy item will now go on a 12-second cooldown, and vice versa if you use your toy item. This is just really nice balancing to her toy item, since it can be really obnoxious for a character to use their normal item and then immediately use their toy item. It's already really annoying to deal with that when you're going against Lucky Guy or when you're going against a survivor in AV2, so adding this little balancing mechanism is fine. Overall, I do think this support rework was really nice, and it will definitely make her support a lot more stronger to deal with. Additionally, her catapults got a bit of a change. Now, Toy Merchant can hold down her catapults while moving in order to, show the trajectory of the catapults. Now, you can essentially set up her catapults a lot better, which allows for a lot more, smart catapult placements, or allows her to, place a catapult immediately on the fly. Additionally, now when you are dropping your catapult, you can now click a button in order to pre-launch, and then as soon as she drops the catapult, she'll be able to automatically jump and then immediately fly away. This basically allows her to get away from the hunter a lot faster now when she automatically places the catapult down, which basically grants a lot more distance and a lot more leeway for her when she's placing down a catapult and trying to fly away. It's just an overall good buff and an overall good kiting buff. A few quality of life that they gave was also that they reduced the time in which, Toy Merchant picks up a catapult, as well as making it to where syringes will no longer appear within the toy box. This is basically to coincide with the Lucky Guy buff, where he can no longer fail with syringes, which is definitely nice, and the retrieval time of the catapults will be a nice buff to have. Finally, in order to nerf her a little bit, they reduce her chest opening speed when looking through chests from 100% to 50%, so it definitely won't be as fast in order to get chest items. Overall, I'm definitely not looking forward to these changes as a hunter player because, Toy Merchant is a character who can be really obnoxious to deal with. I really don't like facing against Toy Merchant as a hunter because, seeing a survivor just fly away with a catapult is just really annoying, and a lot of the spots that Toy Merchant can put the catapults can be extremely infuriating to go against. However, for Toy Merchant, these changes are fantastic and will make her viability skyrocket in the meta. Her support game is now viable now. It was essentially trash when they first reworked it, and this rework basically fixes those problems and makes it a lot more worthwhile to give your items to teammates now. Additionally, the catapult changes will definitely make her far better at kiting, as well as supports, as you can now set up your catapults a lot more effectively, as well as get away much faster once you place those catapults down. So, in that terms, Toy Merchant definitely got the best buffs out of all of the characters in this list, and she will definitely be a lot stronger of a survivor to face off against. And with that being said, that is all of the character changes that are being added, but we're not done yet because we still have the combat changes that are being added. First is going to be the rescue changes, as now rescues will now take 0.86 seconds to go off rather than 1 second. Additionally, they buffed Knight's Chivalrous Sympathy, so now it'll take 0.7 seconds for the rescue to go off rather than 0.8 seconds. This is massive. This is really massive because now the chances of getting Terror Shock have been reduced significantly. This can also be stacked with risky moves to decrease that time further by 40%, meaning that the rescue speeds will be far faster than they are right now. Combine that with the current rescuers in the game, Lanternists, Escapologists, as well as some survivors having rescue buffs or some survivors having chair buffs, this will definitely kill a lot of the camping hunters in this game, as well as weaken a lot of hunters who have to rely on camping and those terror shocks in order to get pressure. There is now less leeway for these camping situations for you as a hunter, which will definitely be really bad in terms of, hunters like Bonbon, hunters like Hellember, hunters who really excel at that camping at the cost of having weaker chases. So overall, this will definitely be a tremendous buff to survivors. However, I don't think this will be as tremendous as this next change. The final change that they did is the fact that now in ranked, the hunter will be revealed to the survivor team as soon as the game is about to start. This essentially kills a lot of hunters who have to rely on that surprise aspect in order to really get value. Hunters such as Dreamwitch, hunters such as Wu Chang, Joseph, Mad Eyes, even weaker hunters like Ripper, like Hellember, like even some hunters like Gamekeeper or Violetta who have to rely on, catching the survivor off guard and using mobility in order to get them, or their limited mobility. It basically means that you will not be able to get the jump on the survivors at all as the hunter. Your role will be revealed who you're playing as at the start of the match, meaning the survivors will have ample amount of times to, brainstorm how to counter you, be able to transition, and be able to essentially make any pressure you have very weak. I'm honestly surprised that they decided to actually do this change, since a lot of the hunters in this game do rely on that surprise aspect. Hunters like Violinist, hunters like Wu Chang, Nightmare, Feaster, Axeboy. There's a lot of hunters who just aren't really that viable unless the survivors don't know who it is. Now, I said Axeboy, but that's kind of a stretch since his trees do grow and thus reveal who he is, but you get what I mean. A lot of the hunters in this game are really weak and don't really have that much to work with, so having that surprise aspect is really nice. Now, that surprise aspect won't be there, thus allowing the teams to, in order to hide, especially against Wu Chang, who really relies on that jump scare aspect when he teleports in order to get easy hits or easy downs via terror shots. Because of this change, I definitely do see the hunter win rate dropping down significantly, as hunters will have to deal with survivors knowing who they are and planning accordingly and countering them accordingly. As a hunter player, I'm definitely not looking forward to this change significantly because I just don't like the idea of the team knowing who the hunter is. But with all that said, that pretty much covers everything that is going on, whether it comes to the character changes or the base kit changes. There are a few quick message changes that they did do as well, such as making the cooldown 3 seconds, but I don't really want to talk about those right now because those aren't really major changes compared to these changes. Overall, I do think these changes alone will make the Survivor the stronger side in terms of meta when going into the next season. I definitely don't see how Hunters will be able to contest with the Survivor side with all these changes, as well as the base changes, as well as the quick message changes on top of them. And that's not even going into the persona changes that they did, where they barely buffed the Hunter side while nerfing a lot of the talents on the Hunter side, as well as buffing a lot of the Survivor side persona web, including broken windows or knee-jerk reflexes. Now, do I think this is going to kill the game in any ways? No, absolutely not. I just don't believe that to be the case. I think what's going to happen is that, as always, the Hunter side is always just going to try and adapt to all these changes and are trying to just make the best of things. That's really all we can really do in terms of sides, and as well as when we have changes like these. We just need to try and adapt and, make the most of all these changes. Now, with that said, this next season is definitely going to be a very different season from the seasons we had before, and you know what? Honestly, maybe it might be for the best to have a change of pace like this, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to all the buffs, seeing how they do in the meta, as well as seeing how Hunters adapt. Anyways, I've been yapping about this for long enough. It's time to wrap up the video right now. It's been a very long time, almost 40 minutes, about to be 40 minutes. Now it's 40 minutes. We will be talking about the talent changes next video, so look forward to that. Additionally, I'm really sorry about this taking so long to make, as well as, taking so long to make the other character videos. If I'm being honest, I've been really burnt out on IDV this past few months, and I've been, very lazy when it comes to making videos, but don't worry, I will finish those videos, as well as getting on to talking about the Queen Bee when she releases into the test server. So, until then, until we talk about the talent changes, Queen Bee, and the character changes, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. And thank you all for your patience. Goodbye.